So you have to be very, very efficient with how you manage those budgets, how you deploy those dollars. You have to level up your creative dramatically, because now what you have is people's engagement has gone down.
Welcome to the Fractional Edge podcast, the ultimate podcast where we unlock the power of workforce planning and discuss the rapidly growing fractional executive staffing strategies to supercharge your business.
Meet your hosts, Carol Fraser, a workforce planning expert, fractional chief human resources officer, and founder of C4 Talent.
And Jason Huett, the sensei of marketing, fractional chief marketing officer, and founder of Fifth Degree Marketing.
We'll bring you insights from seasoned pros, inspiring success stories, and actionable strategies to optimize your valued workforce.
Don't miss this chance to upgrade your business with top industry leaders in today's competitive landscape. So tune in and learn how to unleash your competitive edge.
Hi, my name is Jason Huett. I'm co-host of the Fractional Edge podcast. I'm a CMO and founder of Fifth Degree Marketing. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Carol Fraser, who is founder of C4 Talent and also a CHRO. And today we have a CMO, Steve Tate, with us. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I love kind of just having these conversations, and congrats on this new venture that you guys are both on.
I'm going to give the credit to Carol. This was her brainchild, so I think that's important to note. One thing I just want to give the audience before we jump in, this is going to be really fun because the three of us have ties back to California, which is very interesting. That's where Steve is based out of Glendale, California right now. And he's got a really interesting story. I don't want to give it all away, but I'll give you the short of it. I met Steve on the talent platform Marketer Hire. And they are kind of a talent marketplace. They pair senior level marketing talent with companies. They do just a tremendous job with that. And Steve actually interviewed me to come on as a CMO. So he had me in the hot seat. He asked some very, very good questions. So this is fun for me because I'm going to put him back on the hot seat here. So welcome again, Steve. Can you maybe just give the audience some background in terms of what you do and how you help clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So my fractional CMO practice consists of essentially part strategy, part execution. And so oftentimes the way I work is kind of in a hybrid model, because I sit very closely still with many of these marketing platforms. And I also consider myself as a trained technologist, just being in the tech industry for so long and interfacing with so many different platforms. You sort of have to develop a knack to exploit, whether it's algorithms or just essentially extracting the most you can from a platform in the most efficient manner. And so I often find myself doing discovery work and writing up strategies, but at the same time trying to find what is the most significant blocker that is hindering a company from growth. And there's usually one or two significant things that every single brand, especially startups, are experiencing that have yet to have a light, shined on. And so that is often my job, is through just evidence-based data practice and sort of looking at different ways to validate a specific approach. And then through that approach, identifying that one significant blocker. And so it could be low-hanging fruit. It could be something that has a 6-month roadmap associated with it. But unless that one issue is solved for, that whatever you want to identify it as, that central kind of conflict that is inhibiting the brand from its growth, unless that thing is solved for, then that brand or that company is going to constantly experience issues. And whatever you're doing is basically ignoring that one thing and is trying to solve for it in sort of like in a manner that isn't as effective.
Makes sense. Yeah. And do you see, I know you do a lot of work in the startup world. Do you see any consistency in terms of what those blockers are, or is it all across the board?
There's definitely consistency. There's usually an issue with regard to messaging and how the founders are identifying the problem. And usually it's a product market fit kind of scenario that hasn't undergone an extensive amount of due diligence or market research to figure out, is this the problem set that is most important? Because usually startups, they're trying to do too much, meaning they're diluting their message with too many components that the audience hasn't really resonated on, or the audience doesn't care for, say, 5 of the 6 messaging components that you're introducing to them. But it's really where you're going to find success is not 1 or 2 primary things that they really care about, and that is a complicated process to figure out what that messaging alignment is to the audience. The other thing that's common is the messaging might be right, but the audience mix is completely wrong. So whom they're trying to communicate to is not going to be sort of the right set of people. And it could be the right set of people, but it's not the right time. So for instance, a great example, and I won't call out any specifics, I've been a part of so many different startups and so many different, across so many different industries, that what I can describe to you now can apply to numerous different startups. But during the pandemic, a lot of consumer brands were focused on millennial moms. Okay, so they felt as though if they can figure out a way to get a message to resonate with millennial moms, that they would experience a hockey stick level of growth associated with the brand. The problem is that most of the enterprise companies were doing the same thing, is trying to reach millennial moms. And now what you have is a supply and demand issue that's happening in the marketplaces. So in places like Meta ads or Google ads, there's a supply demand issue happening, with like there's so much inventory of millennial moms in the system, and there's so many advertisers that want to connect with them. And now you're a new brand and you're trying to do the same. Well, guess what? Your CPMs are going to be through the roof, and that's not sustainable for a startup. So the timing wasn't right for that sort of initiative, but it might be that 3 years down the line, now is the time to communicate for that brand with millennial moms. But during that time, it could have been that dads were the ones that were largely ignored. I'm just throwing out an example that might not be true, but that scenario does happen.
Yeah, I think it is true. I know Carol's chomping at the bit to jump into how this ties into HR. So
it's all good. I mean, I actually wanted to. So when you go in as a fractional, well, first off, what's your definition of fractional? I'm curious.
It's an interesting question. I mean, my definition is someone who manages a portfolio of clients and does it in sort of a freelance setting and brings a wealth of experience to very specific areas or industries that they've developed a deep understanding of, a deep domain expertise on. And so my definition of it is someone who you can draft off of their experience and their prior track record and their wins with specific clients in a specific industry and leverage them for that experience for your particular scenario. Because the flip side is the case for fractionals is that, right? Is what I just made, is that you're leveraging a wealth of knowledge and that goes potentially very deep in a particular domain that has a track record across numerous sets of clients that you can now apply to your company, But the flip side of that is essentially hiring someone who's only been at one company for the bulk of their career, which is more of a legacy perspective on corporate workplace. So that, someone's going to work for 25 years for that, retirement party and that gold Rolex. But that's not the case now, right? Because there's been a major disruption to the marketplace with upstarts and emerging brands, and the playing field has been very much leveled with software and technology. So people have realized that they don't necessarily need to commit to one particular company for decades, and that's not necessarily what might even make for a good candidate in today's workforce scenario, this post-COVID world that we're all navigating.
And so when you think about the organizations that would lean into hiring fractionals, and in your area of expertise, I think marketing and maybe finance, you guys get like the first opportunities more times than other potential fractionals.
Right.
What do you in your experiences, if you have any stories, that would be amazing. But, who is really leaning into it and who could or should, I don't want to should on anybody, but who could or should, consider this as their strategic advantage in lieu of hiring a legacy person, or even, if it's a dollar thing, somebody who probably doesn't have enough experience.
Mm-hmm. What I have often seen primarily are seed stage companies who have essentially gone through a certain level of growth and now are hitting hurdles because their specific marketing functions that they have in place, like the tried and true channels that work for startups, whether it's SEO, investments in email program, content marketing, paid ads. They've reached a sort of a plateau, if you will, and they need someone to come in and kind of conduct those functions at a higher level to get them to perform, whether it's more efficiently, more sustainably, or whether they've just hit a wall on their current strategy and their strategy is essentially weak, and they've got specific skill sets across certain functions, but the strategy that those individuals have been given is no longer effective. So they need someone to come in and write up a new strategy, a new plan, and then kind of like orchestrate those functions to a higher level and coach them and mentor them so that they are performing at a level that is like world class. Because every single company right now, like I said, the playing field's been leveled to such a degree, and certain costs and certain efficiencies have or will be very soon here with AI, will come down dramatically in terms of cost. And so, everyone is deploying the same sort of functions, and now you have to sort of find your own truth. And what that truth is oftentimes requires deeper level of thinking and deeper level of engagement with someone who has a track record with that. And, if you're spending time just, on SEO, that's a lot to take on. Or if you're spending time just on paid acquisition, that's also a lot to spend your time on. And it oftentimes requires someone who has a little bit more leadership experience and who's sat in a different position inside of these companies. So who I often see kind of leveraging that, yes, it's seed stage companies that have kind of hit a plateau. They've now got to experience a different level of growth to make a case to their investors for an additional round, or just the story doesn't look good from a runway standpoint, or the space has become very noisy. A lot of competitors have come online, and now you're essentially saying the same thing in a slightly different way, and the audience doesn't really know who to go with. And I also see it happening with private equity turnaround scenarios. So a more legacy company that's been around for a couple decades, and it might be, let's say, a food delivery company that is a more regional based company, but is starting to experience disruption from startups, or starting to experience disruption from how other legacy companies are deploying technology or startups into their suite of offerings. So those turnaround scenarios, you can't just shut the lights, because you've gotta. That's why private equity comes in. There's usually a case to be made to revamp the way the company operates, and then oftentimes that includes a second look on their strategy or on their brand, how it's positioned, and all that. And so there usually is a case to be made to bring in a fractional CMO, to hire a branding agency, breathe some life into the brand, refresh the messaging, potentially revisit who the target is, or how we communicate and engage with the target. So those are some examples that I see.
Those are amazing examples. I mean, I'm really glad that you showed the spectrum of seed to turnaround, because I think many times we do hear a lot about people doing the, seed or Series A or Series B. And I think some of us have experienced, well, no, really, fractional's a great thing for a turnaround, because clearly maybe who was there didn't have the full skill suite, or they've definitely hit their, what they could offer given the shift in the marketplace. And I think that when you're able to partner with somebody on a permanent part-time basis, you're able to get somebody who's really invested. It's not a consultant, right? Mm-hmm. Who's going to give you most likely an out-of-the-box solution, as opposed to something that really fits them. So I'm really happy you talked around turnaround, because I think that that's one that I don't see enough fractionals even leaning into. They tend to lean into that, seed to like Series C. So when you think about, are there different benefits between all the different layers of funding for a fractional to partake in? And, if I'm a CEO, like our listener base, of somebody who's, just about to sign my Series C, and I think I've got my whole team with me, right? Because they've been with me since I couldn't pay them, and now they're going to watch us all get rich. What is it that fractionals are capable of bringing to their workforce or their vision, especially when it comes to marketing?
Right. So I think with a company that's far along with fundraising in the Series C stage, it is going to be a little bit more of a challenge for a fractional CMO to make a case as to what they can bring, because I think that they've done their work to get to a certain point, and so something's working, right? And marketers are often, that office, is the revolving door in the C-suite often, because when things start sort of dipping, we're the first that everyone's looking at to figure out what's going on here, right? There's other things that are outside of a marketer's control, such as the market itself and macroeconomic impacts that happen. And they're usually when the founders figure out that they need a fractional CMO, it's typically because they have identified a problem that their current marketing functions can't solve for. And so, but typically for a Series C company, they're well on the road, right, to Series D and beyond, oftentimes, because it's kind of like, that whole physics idea of, body that stays in motion, or a body that is in motion tends to stay in motion. So they tend to, grow past any sort of pain points, unless, again, barring the scenario like we're in right now, which is it's a very tough set of macroeconomic issues that have come into play, and sort of dealing with inflation is causing a lot of issues. For the transfer of funds to occur as efficiently as they should, it's really putting a hindrance on that, and that means the cost of advertising goes up, engagement goes down. So there's a pullback of funds, there's a pullback on spend across the board, and then that kind of just trickles and causes numerous problems. So but it is hard even in that climate to now make the case for a fractional CMO, because we're not magicians either, right? We're not going to be able to solve all these situations that are happening on a global stage, and that work is difficult. That set of problems to figure out what you're going to do to identify how this company sustains itself is very. Those are difficult decisions that are being made right now, and you can see it on your LinkedIn feed with people losing their jobs, because that's the easiest way, right? Is cutting back, and anyone can do that, and that's why you tend to see it, because it's the easiest, quickest way to increase the likelihood that you'll be around in another year.
Yeah, Steve, you nailed it. Especially in a downturn, typically the best time to increase spend and investment is during that downturn. With the economies that you can get. But one thing I want to just kind of dive into a little bit is, I think you're the only fractional that we've had on, and the audience doesn't know this, but you've got a B2B background, but you also have B2C and e-com background, right?
Correct.
So I know it's tough to find anyone to speak on e-com, at least in the circles that I'm in right now. I float in the B2B probably a little bit more, but I'm just wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about your experience with e-com, because it's a bit of a different animal. What trends are you seeing in terms of strategies and tactics? What's working, what's not working, and what advice can you give?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of the clients that I work with, they are sort of across the board in the B2C realm, meaning across multiple industries. They could be direct to consumer brands. All of them are direct to consumer in that sense, obviously, but I have clients across luxury, CPG clients, small kitchen appliance, and a couple of others that sort of escape me at the moment. Other sort of like curated retail brands as well. So I think that what I see, in terms of all the problems that exist in the current climate, are obviously impacting these B2C e-com brands, meaning the cost of advertising has gone up. Inflation has impacted that. So you have to be very, very efficient with how you manage those budgets, how you deploy those dollars, and it could be very specific, strategic and tactical measures that you take, such as bidding methodologies or your creative mix, where you have to level up your creative dramatically, because now what you have is people's engagement has gone down, right? And so your creatives and your messaging and how you go to market need to be leveled up. You really have to spend some time and thought behind what's going to resonate with the audience. What's the messaging that we've seen that's been most impactful? from a return on ad spend perspective. And now how can we test and create variety on that messaging even further? How could we go, how could we double down on that bet, so to speak? So in terms of, what works are the same things that worked during the pandemic, but it's much more competitive now, meaning, you do have to be diversified. You do have to have a full funnel approach. You do have to sort of optimize your messaging and your creative. You do have to test audiences. You have to do all the things you should have done in the pandemic or prior. But money was cheap back then. So engagement and also time was cheap too, because a lot of people had much, much more time and much, much more money in their accounts than they do now. Yeah, meaning, like, I know a lot of people who took a forced sabbatical, right? And all of a sudden they're doing yoga retreats, or they've taken 6 months to now become a writer, or to develop their solopreneur practice, or whatever it is, right? They had ample time, and they had a lot of screen time. So that screen time converted, whereas right now it's much, much more fragmented. So we're all back to our usual sort of habitual place of working too many hours, having less money to spend, and so you're going to experience that from an e-commerce and a consumer brand perspective. Your conversion rates are going to be lower. Your spend's going to be higher. Your CAC's going to be higher. So you've got to be much more efficient with how you deploy and how you operate as a team.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're in that space, e-com space, I think you quickly realize that if you are looking for a CMO and you have an e-com business, that it is a real area of specialty. You're going to want to find someone that has that background. Thank you for tuning in to the Fractional Edge. We hope you enjoyed our insightful discussions and feel inspired to unleash your competitive edge.
Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest episodes. You can also connect with our podcast guests to benefit from their expertise and explore collaboration opportunities by visiting our website, thefractionaledge.com. Join us next time as we continue to explore the power of workforce planning and fractional executives in today's competitive business landscape. Until then, take care and keep growing.